Hi, my name is Amar, and this is Conversations with Jennifer. Jennifer is an estate planning attorney, and today we're going to talk about the fundamental differences between a revocable living trust and an irrevocable trust. So, where do we start? There's so much to cover.
Yeah, so I was, as you know, I was talking to you about how there are certain questions that I get from clients all the time, and particularly at the initial meeting where we're talking about different estate planning devices, and obviously I talk to clients a lot about trusts, and oftentimes people don't really understand the difference between a living trust or a family trust, which is revocable, and an irrevocable trust. And so just based on the nature of, the titles of these instruments, one, you can change. You create this trust, you can make any changes to it. You can revoke it entirely, you can amend it. It's fully within your control as far as what the provisions are. An irrevocable trust, again, based on the title or the name of this document, it cannot be changed, or it's much more difficult to change the provisions of these types of trusts. So oftentimes when people are coming to me and talking about putting together a basic estate plan and they're talking about trust, they're talking about revocable trusts. Those are the family trusts that they're putting together that are going to hold their assets. Some of the key differences beyond not being able to change irrevocable trust is irrevocable trusts typically have a separate tax identification number or EIN for that trust, whereas revocable trusts use the individual social security number. They have to file different income tax returns than individuals. Family trusts or revocable trusts, all the income's reported on their personal income tax return, their 1040. Irrevocable trusts, to the extent they have income, report it on a fiduciary income tax return, a Form 1041. And so they have different tax filing requirements as well. And then probably even more important is a revocable trust. It's yours. So to the extent you get sued, you have any creditor issues, you're not protecting these assets. And I get that question all the time. If I put my residence in a trust, I'm protected from creditors. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works, unfortunately. Whereas if you have an irrevocable trust, that is considered a separate kind of entity. That's why it has a separate tax ID number, but it's not technically yours any longer. Oftentimes when clients of mine are setting up an irrevocable trust, it's for the benefit of someone else, child, family member, someone, just some neutral third party, charity. It doesn't benefit you any longer. So if you get sued, to the extent you move assets over to an irrevocable trust, they do provide you with some creditor protection because they're not technically yours any longer. So that's a big difference. But again, I remind clients all the time, if you create these and you put assets in them, you can't get them back. So, and these tend to be gifting scenarios or at death, inheritance scenarios. I create an irrevocable trust while I'm alive for the benefit of my daughters, or I create an irrevocable trust at my death for the benefit of my daughters. Based on the terms of those trusts, those will provide my children with some protection in the future from creditors, a bad divorce. But there is some, work and tax situations involved with those sort of structures.
Yeah, so from what I'm hearing is that the revocable trust, those assets are still yours. There's not that much additional protection. And that protection is really from creditors. Is there anything else, other protection that you get in the irrevocable trust?
Yeah, so you can provide some tax planning for the beneficiary as well. You can, protect as much as possible from transfer tax when that beneficiary passes away, depending on how you structure it. So using the example of me setting up an irrevocable trust for the benefit of my daughters, depending on how I structure that, I can protect those assets from estate tax at their death. So you can build some tax planning features into these types of trusts. I would say for the most part, revocable trusts, really, those are probate avoidance vehicles. You are just trying to streamline the process if you become incapacitated or at death, but that's it. That's all we're doing for those. Whereas irrevocable trust, yeah, creditor protection, tax planning, also protection in the event the beneficiary gets divorced. These are not a part of the marital estate. They're not even separate property. They're your assets that they have a beneficial interest in. So there may be some disclosure requirements, but it's not technically the beneficiary's assets.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, is that the revocable trust is basically to streamline the process of when you pass away, whereas irrevocable trusts have a piece in like legacy planning and how do you want to tax, using tax efficient structures, et cetera, to distribute assets. Is there certain situations where when you're doing planning, just one is just clearly better than the other beyond just the protection piece?
Well, I think, and we've talked about this in some of our prior conversations, really, there are very few scenarios where I would say you absolutely shouldn't have a revocable trust in place. Here in California, the process just tends to be more complicated when a person dies. So a lot of people should think about and consider and discuss having a revocable trust. Whereas not, I wouldn't say that many people, or it's as common a discussion about irrevocable trust, because again, as you mentioned, it's more of a legacy planning situation. It provides some protection for someone else, not you. So we always start with the foundational estate planning documents, which is how do we protect your assets while you're alive, and then at death, then that's when we start talking about the irrevocable trust being created for someone else, another beneficiary, typically family members.
Yeah, so some of these can kind of build on top of each other, right?
Correct. I have a lot of revocable trusts that inside create irrevocable trusts at certain events. So, they can be combined. But again, I would say most people probably should be talking about or thinking about having a revocable trust here in California. Not everyone here in California needs to think about irrevocable trusts.
There you go. And so if you have questions or concerns, please reach out to Jennifer or myself. If you have questions, please leave it in the comments. And thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.